This, winter, but anyway, for the next few months, we're going to look at passages from St. John's Gospel. Don't actually want to start at John 1:1, as we'll do that at Christmas. But basically the prologue of St. John, as you know, the first so many verses, is where St. John sets out in amazing prose who exactly Jesus is. Then spends the rest of his Gospel expanding on the subject. However, in the prologue, there are verses which really break into it are about John the Baptist, not about Jesus at all. And then the introductory passage follows in relation to John the Baptist. And I just want to read those verses for you, and then that passage about John the Baptist. So it's from John 1:6, then 15, then 19. God sent his messenger, a man named John, who came to tell people about the light, so that all should hear the message and believe. He himself was not the light. He came to tell about the light. This was the real light that comes into the world and shines on all mankind. John spoke about him. He cried out, "This is the one I was talking about when I said, 'He comes after me, but he is greater than I am, because he existed before I was born.'" The Jewish authorities in Jerusalem sent some priests and Levites to John to ask him, "Who are you?" John did not refuse to answer, but spoke up openly and clearly, saying, "I am not the Messiah." "Who are you then?" they asked. "Are you Elijah?" "I am not," John answered. "Are you the prophet?" they asked. "No," he replied. "Then who are you?" they said. "We have to take an answer back to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" John answered by quoting the prophet Isaiah. "I am the voice of someone shouting in the desert, 'Make a straight path for the Lord to travel.'" The messengers who had been sent by the Pharisees then asked John, "If you are not the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet, why do you baptize?" And John answered, "I baptize with water, but among you stands the one you do not know. He is coming after me, but I am not good enough even to untie his sandals." And all this happened in Bethany on the east side of the river Jordan, where John was baptizing. I think we're familiar with the role of John the Baptist. We often think about this in Advent, as he's the forerunner, the preparatory announcer. St. John, in writing his Gospel, is not really very interested in John the Baptist. He's really interested in Jesus. He wants to get on through John the Baptist so he can talk about Jesus. Very little is said about John the Baptist. But actually, when you read this little passage, John the Baptist isn't very interested in John the Baptist either. He's primarily interested in Jesus. And we can well be like that, and rightly so, and say, John the Baptist is just sort of a preview bit. Let's get on to the main thing, the main person. And that is correct. But in looking at this passage, I think we can learn a fair bit from John the Baptist, because I'm always interested in somebody who's not interested in himself. This central question that's asked by these representatives of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law and what have you is a crucial one for all of us. So they say, "Who are you?" It's a question of identity. It sounds a bit of a cliche, "Who are you?" But it's not like that. It's just a basic question. So who are you? And if I was to say to you this morning, "Okay, then tell me who you are," those of you like me who cannot immediately draw to mind the total numbers on your national insurance card, how many of you know your national insurance number off by heart? Oh, it's sad. You need to get out more. Look. See, they can't get it off you if you don't know it. But where does our identity lie? You know, Who am I? And you say, well, no, this is all about Jesus. Well, we will sing it's not about me, it's about Jesus in a few moments. But actually, if Christianity is my relationship with Jesus, it's got something to do with me. After all, he's interested in me, so perhaps I ought to be interested in me. I ought to be able to think, if you're going to have a relationship, it's a two-ended one. And when Jesus says things such as, love your neighbour as you love yourself, well, you need to know yourself if you're going to know how to love then in that, and so on. And so it's a big question. It's a good thing just to reflect without lots of navel-gazing as to how I define myself. As with all these interviewers like you get on the BBC, they ask the person a question and then suggest the answer. And woe betide if it's not their answer. But anyway, it's, that sense of we want to lead you with the answers. And there's a series of answers here. We won't take them in the order that they're actually given. But they say, so are you the prophet? Now, if you read the commentaries on this, the prophet is a rather amorphous concept. Something or someone without a name who's got to come before the Messiah comes and is going to be the prophet who says something and announces it. And what I'm really trying to say is, like a lot of people do, these people are mystified by John the Baptist. Who is this guy? How can we understand him? How can we get a handle on him? And the first thing they do is to try and classify him. So are you, like brackets, the prophet? Because if you are, that gives us a good start. We can classify you. We know, okay, it's all right, relax everybody, he's the prophet, That's not a bad thing to do. We all have to make sense of our experience of other people. And you can't spend a whole lifetime doing psychoanalysis of everybody. You need to be able to say, what sort of person is this? After all, in the Bible it's full of the Pharisees came. Well, who were they? Lots of individuals. The Sadducees came. Lots of individuals. There were many lepers. Well, who were they? There's an immediately sense we need to classify. We need to organise our experience of people just to keep alive, for goodness sake. I've had several funerals to do, sadly, lately. In an obituary or an oration or a eulogy or whatever you would call it, one of the things one does is to try and catch the character of the person. And you ask all sorts of people what the person was like. Unless they've left a note to make sure that you say the right things, dead people do not contribute to what is said at the funeral. And it means that really the picture you have is the picture that everybody else has. It's how they relate. Oh, it's very talkative. He was a very talkative man, meant he talked a lot to me, sort of thing. Very kind, he was kind to me. Very focused meant he never cared about anybody else, sort of thing. It's how it was for me, and the person is formed by the way people saw. But there's always a generalisation. I was a good man. Excellent lady. And what does that mean? But it means that we've got a general categorisation. And woe betide me if I'm occasionally, in the last 30 years, been at a funeral when I've said, really good guy, and everybody looked at you and thought, no, he wasn't. you don't want that. It's an embarrassment. It's difficult, but you want that categorization. And it's not just a generalization. The person becomes what everybody else thinks they are. And so John the Baptist could have said, he could have said, okay, it's chaotic, it's difficult. Obviously, this is not working because you are worried about who I am. Let's say I'm the prophet, okay? In other words, you've got a pigeonhole and I'll sit in it. And that suits all of us. That's got that out of the way. I might not even be absolutely the prophet, but it'll do as a working model sort of thing. And I think that we do that, don't we? People have an opinion of us. It's not that they're pressurising us. They're just trying to make sense of us. And we who are trying to make sense of ourselves say, oh, I'll go along with that then. Sometimes people say to me, you're looking very tired today, and I immediately feel tired. And I also think I can use that, means that I can go home early. So you've got a pigeonhole and I'll sit in it. We become not only other people's expectations, but we run our own expectations along with it. That's good. How else do you live? You can't spend all your life in trauma about everything, In other words, we're defined generically. And John the Baptist says, that won't do for me. I'm not having an identified build on that. Thank you very much. I am not the prophet. Then they say something, they say, so are you Elijah? You know? Well, you say that's another prophet, but it's a historic prophet, the great man representing history. You know how obsessed the Jews were with their heritage. We are the children of Abraham. Who are we? We are the children of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the others and all the prophets and the whole lot. We are where we've come from. Don't mess with us. Jesus was not happy with that. But there's a great tendency to think that people are their history. The other thing that you get in an obituary is a timeline. Born here. That was his parents. If they were famous, that was his grandparents or her grandparents, you know. Married so-and-so, moved there, did this. In fact, you have a whole sort of potted history of all the things they did and went. And again, that adds to who are they? They are what's happened to them. And John the Baptist could have said, okay, I stand in line with the prophets. I am of the prophets. I'm the prophetic caste, the prophetic order. I know that the ancient Jews had a sort of a rather mystical feeling that the prophet could be reincarnated and arrived again. But setting that aside, John the Baptist could have said, look you're, okay, I'm kind of Elijah-ish, you know? I'm in the line. You want to understand where I'm coming from? Think Elijah. You want to think how to understand me? This is where I fit into the past. My roots are good roots. I have a good heritage. I have a good inheritance. You know, I could be defined by where I've come from. And they think, oh, that's great. Oh, we know where he fits in now. We know where he fits in now. He fits in with this, you see. And we could be the same. And there's something to be said for this. I am what's happened to me in the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. In my moving around over the years, I collect bits and pieces, you know, sort of, I was going to say tram tickets, but I'm not that old, but sort of thing. You get bits and pieces and you put them in a box file. Not a lot, but on the top floor of the manse, I've got a box file from Bristol and a box file from Aberystwyth and a box file from Cambridge and from Barrow and from London and from Cyprus and from Germany and from Sussex and from Ivybridge and from Nottingham, and one is slowly building up from here. And I look at those and I think, is that me then? Is that me? Is that me? It's not generic, it's genetic. Where have you come? You are where you've come from. You wear what's happened to you. Yeah? That's one way of defining yourself. And with that, there will be negatives, you know. I am who I am because I remember failing. I feel guilty. That will never be put right. That was a mistake. That went, you know. Or is this topical now? I failed my 11 plus. Seems to be topical. Or it could be, I am who I am because of what I achieved and what I passed and how good I was at this, and you know that I've got all these, you know, qualifications, or I've got, you know, 15 grandchildren who all love me, or you know, I grow big marrows and here's me winning the marrow competition in 1968, sort of thing. All these things that make me the person I am. And John the Baptist says, not going to define me by what I've done. I don't. So how is he going to define himself? The Greek way of saying it was, you don't want to be constrained by people's opinions, and you don't want to be tied down, and you don't want to be constrained by your history. So you've got that great picture of the Greek philosopher. Know thyself. All right? I decide who I will be. Now, I, in many ways, am a child of the 60s. And we, in those days, did not want to be tied into what our parents had done, and we were not going to be constrained by society to tell us what we need to be like. I want to be me, and I want to be free. That's been a great result, hasn't it? But anyway, that sense of we will identify ourselves. But if we do that, and if you are somebody who said, I decide who I am, And that's all very brave and all that sort of thing. You're really saying something like, I'm what it's really all about. I'm what it's about. You see that, don't you? You see that in small children. I want my milk. I'm all about that. You see it in teenagers who say, I just want to do what I want to do. You see it in young thrusting sort of adults. I'm going to make my way. I'm going to make a mark. You see it in more retired people who say, it's about us. We earned our pension and our bungalow and our free bus pass. It's about us. You see it in old people's homes where somebody is saying, why doesn't Mabel shut up, and why don't they turn the television off, and why isn't the nurse come now? Throughout the whole of life. I'm what it's about. But if I'm defining myself by what it's really all about, I'm being a little God. It's me. So when they say, are you the Christ? John says, I'm not. Not because he's going to be caught up in a big divine thing, but it would be easy for him to say, well, I'm a kind of think of me as a Messiah figure. After all, the Holy Spirit is working powerfully in him. We know that. Hugely effective. The temptation to hubris here must have been enormous. He says, no, I'm not what it's all about. And he defines himself thus in relation to God. He says profoundly, I know who I am because I know who I am in relation to the one who it is all about. And compared to him, I'm not even worthy to untie his sandals. It's like the real bottom of the pit slaves who took off the sandals before they washed the people's feet. Hardly noticed, hardly known. I know where I am in relation to the Lord. We need to define ourselves as John the Baptist did. How are you in relation to Jesus? Not are you a loving person because people think you're a good egg, or not are you a loving person because I remember doing great things in the past, but how am I in relation to Jesus' love? Well, I'm a good way away from that. Or Jesus' sacrifice, I'm a good way away from that. How do I compare to Jesus? How am I related to him? Well, John says I'm here and he's there. That's what I really know. That's how I'm really defined in relation to the Lord himself. If you're navigating with a map, there's two main ways you can find out where you are and define where you are. One is dead reckoning, where you have simply worked out your distances and your bearings all the way along, and by plotting them on the map, you finish up knowing where you are. It's great to do that in fog or in the pitch dark. If you're clever, you can do it. The other way is to see where you are and do resection. There's the church tower, there's that clump of trees, there's the hill, and you can work out where you are, where I've come from, and how I relate to myself. If you're a child of the 60s, you would have said, I don't like maps, I'm going to go where I like. And after you've walked over a cliff and through a minefield, you think, the map's still there, even if I think I want to be free. But what John the Baptist says is, let's do sat-nav. It's not where I came from. It's not what's out there. It's what's up here. How do I relate? That's where my bearings lie, with the Lord himself. And not only am I defined by that, but my whole life is organized by it. Because now I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way. It's not my message, it's my voice. And it makes his whole life work. What he wears, what he eats, where he lives, his old way of living, what he says, what he does. Now for him, social relevance, cultural relevance is wearing a hairy coat, being a bit weird, being a bit smelly, and eating locusts and living in a desert. But for us, social relevance, what you eat, what you wear, how you are, what you say, is a holistic view of life which is governed by the definition that God gives you, and that's the purpose he has for you. And that is something which is not just for the past and for now. My definition defines my future. He says of the Lord, he was here before me and he will go before me. Who holds the future for us? That is a good definition. As is so often the case, St. Paul sums it up in 1 Corinthians 15:8. He says, last of all, he appeared also to me, even though I am like someone whose birth was abnormal. I am the least of all the apostles. I do not even deserve to be called an apostle because I persecuted God's church. But by God's grace, I am what I am. Don't count me as apostle. I don't really work in with all the big spiritual apostles compared to them. And my history is bad. I was there when they stoned Stephen. I persecuted the church. I don't qualify with a good history. But through the grace of God, I am who I am. In the beginning of Romans, he says, doesn't he, with his intro, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, an apostle chosen and called by God to preach the good news. That's who I am. And that's what we are. We are not defined by the last 50, 60, 70 years of our lives. We're not defined by the opinions we have of ourselves or other people have. We are defined by this table. This is our main cross-reference. It is through Christ I am who I am. I do what I do, and in him is my future.